Please be seated, everyone.
Chief Justice Rabner, former Chief Justices Alley, Associate Justices of the Supreme Court, Governor Byrne, Director Grant, and members of the Stern family, I want to welcome all of you today for the presentation of the portrait of our former presiding judge for administration, Edwin H. Stern. I'm so pleased that so many current and former members of our Supreme Court are with us today, an acknowledgement of Judge Stern's contributions to the judiciary and to the state of New Jersey through his long and distinguished career. And we are honored that Governor Byrne has been able to join us today. The Appellate Division is a uniquely collegial court, and so many members, past and present, have turned out to honor Judge Stern. And it's impossible to acknowledge or introduce all of them. I do want to, however, acknowledge the presence of Judge Ariel Rodriguez, who has served as the acting presiding judge for administration for this past year. And I also want to acknowledge our clerk, Joe Orlando, who with his entire staff has worked so hard to make today's event possible. The walls of our Appellate Division courtroom display our history in the portraits of our past presiding judges for administration. And the portrait of Judge Stern will join those of his predecessors. Judge Sidney Goldman, Judge Milton Conford, Judge Robert Matthews, Judge Herman Michaels, and Judge Sylvia Pressler. At the time that the portrait of Judge Michaels was presented, Judge Pressler spoke, and she said at that occasion that these individuals had set the standards that continue to inspire and guide the court, and they personified the striving for excellence that has characterized this court from its inception. And Judge Stern, through his service on this court, indeed throughout his entire career, more than met that measure. Fernando Pinguelo is a former clerk of Judge Stern's. He clerked for Judge Stern for the year 1997-1998. I received an email that Mr. Pinguelo received a grade from Judge Stern, but I will not share that with you. Judge Stern is free to do that. But we will now hear from Mr. Pinguelo. Pinguelo?
Thank you. I thought long and hard about how best to reflect on Judge Stern's lifetime of accomplishments from his law clerk's perspective. Problem is, how do you condense 30 years or 262,800 hours into a 3-minute speech? Well, luckily, for me at least, there's an app for that. Twitter, the online social networking phenomenon that enables users to send and receive messages of up to 140 characters, known as tweets, or as I'd like to refer to it, as the 21st century's answer to curbing pontification and verboseness. So what I have planned isn't quite a speech, nor would it qualify entirely as a 140-character tweet. Rather, I've prepared a tweech. Yes, a tweech. So I present here today a compilation of 140-character sound bites submitted by some of Judge Stern's former law clerks who condensed their clerk year into a tweet. And while I'm at it, I'd like to take a moment to personally lobby the Chief Justice to consider a rule amendment to 2:6-7 of the Rules Governing Appellate Practice, which currently puts the maximum page number for initial briefs at 65, or more aptly, 109,850 characters. I believe an amendment to Rule 2:6-7, modeled after the 140-character tweet, would work just fine, and suspect your colleagues would appreciate that. That said, on to the tweets. Sam Flack's 2009 to 2010, the most profound impact that I witnessed Judge Stern have was when he allowed a pro se plaintiff suing the judiciary for discrimination to argue for an hour. The plaintiff closed by saying it was a relief to finally be heard. Judge Stern always listens. Andy Barrett, 1984 to 1985. Warmest regards to a mentor, friend, and good guy. You hold the record for 30 written decisions in 1 year as a trial judge. Chris Bork, 1989 to 1990. My most memorable Judge Stern moment was being sworn into the profession I'd always aspired to by my most admired legal scholar. Thank you, Judge. These tweets truly capture how influential Judge Stern was and continues to be in our lives. Before I close, I'd like to share with you a few statistics which are a direct result of our connection to you since 1981. 48 law clerks spanning 30 years. 7 law clerks now work at large law firms. 80 law clerks now work at small, medium law firms. 8 law clerks have started their own firms. 5 law clerks now work at companies as in-house counsel. 5 law clerks are at home with the kids. 2 law clerks now work at pro bono legal services. 10 law clerks now work in the public sector. 2 law clerks now work in academia. And 1 law clerk is an elected official. We practice in 15 of the 21 New Jersey counties, in 6 states and 3 countries. Judge, we appreciate the long hours we spent working with you. We enjoyed your openness in sharing your family with us. And most of all, thank you for not only helping to make us better professionals, but also, more importantly, better individuals.
I do have a few words that I'd like to say about the honoree, but first, I want to congratulate the artist, Liza Gladstein Amir. This is truly magnificent. I understand that for this accomplished artist, this is her first portrait, and it is an incredible statement of what the future holds for you and your work. You've captured Judge Stern so beautifully. We're pleased to have you here today. Now, as for the honoree, anyone who comes into contact with Judge Stern knows and walks away with a sense that they have spent time with a true master. And that's true whether the interaction takes place in an appellate panel conference room, at a lecture hall, in a meeting of one of our committees, or over lunch. After just a few moments with this gentle, modest person, it's easy to see why he's revered as one of the true giants of the New Jersey Judiciary. You get quickly, if you're wise enough to listen, a sense of his depth of experience, of his knowledge on so many issues in different areas of law. Add to that his generous, earnest spirit, and you have a person who is always willing to lend a hand to everyone else. Many of you have sat with Ed on appellate division panels over the years, and you know firsthand of his many gifts, the clarity of his thinking and his writing, his willingness to probe, his ability to get the big picture and see the nuanced questions underneath, a willingness to reconsider and to redraft opinions as he attempts to express the reasoning as clearly and as ably as one possibly could, his enormous capacity for hard work, and his steadfast dedication to excellence and to the cause of justice. When he sat temporarily on the Supreme Court for the last year of his service on the bench, the justices saw all of those qualities and then some. At least once during any conference, and Fernando, one of your co-clerks, alluded to this, when a nuanced, difficult question of law would come up, usually a presentation by someone else, Judge Stern, in his inimitable, calm fashion, would stand up and say, I think that Justice so-and-so wrote about this 26 years ago in the XYZ case. Then he'd walk over to the bookshelves, grab just the right volume off of the shelf, and open and recite from the case, which of course stood for the very principle that he remembered that it did. And we've all learned a great deal from him, from his fund of knowledge, his humility, his humanity. And that's why it is so fitting that will remember his many contributions to the legal career with this portrait that will hang in a courtroom where lawyers walk in their search for justice. Ed, we're so pleased to be able to celebrate today with you, with your family. On behalf of the Supreme Court, congratulations.
Thank you, Chief Justice Rabner. Chief Justice Zali?
And now I'll try to compress this into about 2 minutes. Now is not the time, given the constraints of time and everything else, that you don't get into Eddie's substantial legal accomplishments. Few of us have accomplished as much. A master, yes, of so many disciplines. No one in the state has a better grasp, for example, of the criminal law and procedure. But that's only a small piece of it. In that process of making decisions and rendering opinions, he always demonstrated first the intelligence to figure out what the right thing was to do, and then he had the integrity to see it through, and ultimately, in as many cases as he could, added a little bit of an ingredient called compassion to what he did. The real story about Eddie is not that substantive stuff. It's about how he's been so generous of his time, his ability, his expertise, and himself, whether with strangers, whether young lawyers, whether old lawyers, whomever. He was a privilege, as I say, to know him for every bit of 20, well, it's now 33 years. I know anyone who's more unselfish, I know of no more decent human being. There are those little grace notes of his going into the Appellate Division clerk's office whenever he was down to go around and to greet everyone, not because he was politicking, there was no reason to do that, but simply because he cared. And he had great joy in doing what he was doing, saying hello, I repeat, to everyone and everyone. Great joy, and also with great sincerity. We've talked about Ed's worrying, but over the years, there's one thing that he worried about as much as anything else, and that was the welfare and the well-being of our judicial system. His dedication to the improvement of our courts and to the improvement of the rules under which they operated and operate has been nothing less than astounding. And so, as I close this out, I'm sort of trying to reconnect Ed in some ephemeral way, though he is retired, to our judicial system. How do I do it? You are, no secret, facing challenging times, but you are and you will continue to be equal to the task. What I'm doing here is just suggesting that, as a reminder from time to time, think of Ed's commitment to both justice and to our judiciary as an example to all of us, and following that example. With public servants like Ed and like you will endure. By this portrait today and by your presence, you honor Ed Stern. But the best way to honor him, I think, is to follow his example, his dedication to our fellow man and to the system.
I love the great Gibbons firm. I love the people there, but I miss my appellate division friends and colleagues and family. My secretary of 21 years, Estelle Kestenbaum, just physically couldn't be here today, but I understand Diane Agapito is, and I thank her for everything, and for the other people, other secretaries, friends, and colleagues in Morristown. I note that even Ron Graves was able to take an hour off. The hardest working man that I know. My clerks are, as said before, part of my family. They have contributed to me, to my thinking, to my education, to learning what is going on as they come out of school. I thank everyone in the clerk's office, the staff attorneys, the case managers, the workers. If there is any legacy I want to be remembered by, it is the appointment on recommendation of the appointment committee of Mary Kate, Judge Cuff, Judge Perillo, and myself, of the appointment of Joe Orlando. He is terrific. That office is terrific. I thank him. I thank Jahaira Rodriguez, Carol Fralin, and Susan McLaughlin for this wonderful day. And it's a wonderful day for my family and myself. To my family, to Liza you've met, I thank her. to my mother-in-law who is here, who with her late husband made it possible for me to stay in government and for my children to have an education, to my wonderful sons, Scott, Mark, and Paul, my daughter-in-law, Lauren, who is with our 1-month-old. Oh, you are? With our 2-year-old. Our 1-month-old was our 2-year-old's birthday present. I love them. I thank them for everything. Today, on the way down, my family stopped at the cemetery, because at my retirement dinner, I neglected to mention the role of my parents. My father is probably most responsible for my being a lawyer. I quit law school 6 times in my first semester. I couldn't take it. And each time when I called him or thought about calling him, I was motivated to go back to school because he really thought I would enjoy it. He turned out to be right. And of course, what can I say about my dearest friend, my love of 41 years? I won't talk about the year before we got married. Of 42 years, Beverly, who has done so much for me and put up with so much. And Chief, let me say that without studying law or the New Jersey Constitution, she certainly has learned how to give a directive. I regret that I won't be around for the implementation of e-filing, of a meaningful appellate process for termination of parental rights cases, hopefully for compatible systems. Life goes on. I believe 70 is too young for mandatory retirement, but it's time for fresh blood, for new young people to look at things periodically. So I will not be around physically, but I'm going to be committed. I'm going to remain committed from where I am to continue to work for sentencing reform, to provide against undue sentence disparity, for the rights of indigents in civil cases to appeal, for full funding of legal services, and at the same time, expanding the services of other pro bono organizations. And I just thank you for everything. I have been very active in the Council of Chief Judges of State Courts of Appeals. I've been involved in a number of committees. And Chief, the reputation of this court is outstanding because its system, the New Jersey system, the New Jersey Appellate Division, deserve that through the judges who have sat here, the chiefs that have appointed them. And I'm very happy to announce what most people do not know. The Council of Chief Judges of State Courts of Appeal will be holding their 2015 annual meeting in Newark, New Jersey, which will bring the 93 chief judges of intermediate appellate courts here. That includes states like Texas with 14 districts and California with 6 and the like. So let me close by thanking you sincerely and honestly for everything. And in my capacity as former presiding judge for administration, I close as a spokesman for the Appellate Division for the last time and say to the Supreme Court to please remember always the most important word in the English language, affirmed. Thank you.
That was exactly an hour.